Hi everybody, my name is Joe Pavitt and welcome to the Get On With It edition of the Sand Dune tutorial, and we're going to do exactly that. Go into geometry nodes, we can use our geometry node new option here, add in a grid. We're going to wire up the size X and size Y to our grid inputs, and we're also going to create a new input here called cell size. Open up the N panel, group, rename that one cell size, and then we're going to change that to a float. We're going to use this in two math nodes, so we're going to go for math. We're going to do a divide, and we're going to use this to create the number of vertices that we need, and we're going to use that for vertices X, and then we're just going to duplicate that down and use that for vertices Y, and then that gives us nice control over that. And then we're going to have this as our geometry output. Give it a cell size. Let's start off with something like 0.01. Chuck it into wireframe mode so we can see what we're doing. Then we are going to add a Voronoi texture. We're going to add a set position. We are also going to only affect the z-axis, so a combine x, y, z. And we're going to need a multiply just to tame them down, math node multiply. So the distance into the math node, that output goes into the Z. And we're also going to use the group input just to control the height of the dune from our geometry nodes. And then we're going to have the Z coming into the offset, so we now get something here, and we just set our height to start off with at about 0.15. Then from the Voronoi texture, we're going to add some extra randomization to it, so we're going to have a position node input, then a vector math, just to give us ability to translate some of this and transform the UV map a little bit, then a noise texture, which is going to use that position, and then we're going to have a mix RGB, so mix RGB, and we're going to use a mix node with the vector output there and the color output of our mix of our noise texture, and that's going to be our vector input here. So we can reduce this to like quite a low number, but it just gives us some more randomization in our dune, which is looking good. We also need to add, after our set position, we're going to add a set shade smooth so that we get rid of those faces, and we're also going to set material to material 1. We'll make that a different material a little later on. Give ourselves a little bit more space because we're going to need that in a moment. So Voronoi texture there, so that's our kind of like main dune height. I'm going to up or reduce the cell size now, just to make it a little bit cleaner on those edges. We're now going to add our kind of detailed waves. So for that, we're going to add another Voronoi texture, but a much higher scale. We're going to then have a multiply node, or vector math multiply. And what we're going to do is then stretch a Voronoi texture to make it wavy. I did try this with waves, didn't quite work out. Explanation in the beginner version of this video. So then that's going to come in here, and we're going to have a mix RGB with a noise texture, so you can just duplicate that noise texture from there. Have this one drop down into the vector. The color of this is going to go into the top, and then the distance of this is going to go into the bottom. We're going to change this to an overlay node. That overlay node, just to show you what this is going to look like, you can chuck it into the top of that multiply. It's way too high for now, but we can drop it to like 0.01. What we're going to do is we're going to stretch this in one domain by changing the add to be a multiply, and it's going to be 1 in the Z, and we won't go for 0, we'll go for something like 0.05. So you get a bunch of waves that we are then going to add to our bigger geometry our bigger Dune geometry. And we're going to do that with an overlay node as well. We're also going to chuck in a math multiply here, just to give us a bit more control over the heights of these things. So if we do multiply by 1 for now, this Voronoi is going to then go into the top, and then the Dune height we can up again, but to 1.15, and then we can contain this down. So we're going to have another group input, and this is going to be our height detail, and the height of the detail is going to be much smaller, and even then it's probably still a little bit too much, so you can go for like 0.05, just to add that in. We are then going to jump over to shading. In our shading tab, we're going to switch to cycles. I'm going to put it in that mode, and we're going to have a Fresnel node input here, wire that up to a mix RGB. That's going to be an overlay as well, and we're going to set the color on the top. I've got a hex code here that works quite nicely, so A8815C, and then we're going to put the Fresnel node in the bottom, so you can see the Fresnel node gives us a kind of nice velvety effect. The overlay node here is then going to go into this piece, and that gives us the textures there. Back into our geometry nodes, and we can reduce the impact of the overlay here, because that's taking up too much, so we want something along those lines. We really want to add in a bunch of detail down here as well, and maybe even increase that scale. That's going to be tiny actually, that's too big at the moment. So in that shading tab, we also need to add a HDRI, so we're going to remove the default light that we have, and then connect to our background, Control T if you've got Node Wrangler installed. I've got a HDRI called Sprout Sunrise from textures.com. I'm just going to line up my view to something interesting, kind of around there is interesting. Let's turn off the background as well, so it's just purely transparent, quite like that. So then we can just do align camera to view, and that gives us something interesting to render out. And we've got the little waves in there, we've got the overall genes, and that's the just get on with it version. There's a great CG cookie tutorial which talks about how you can composite this stuff, add in the backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to cover that here, just wanted to get the basic geometry nodes set up in place and show you how you can do it with the new geometry nodes available. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to comment, reach out to me on any of the relevant social medias. But yeah, thanks very much, bye.